50 Surprising and Little-Known Facts about John Vernou Bouvier III. Blackjack Bouvier remains one of the most intriguing gentlemen of early 20th century American society, a Wall Street stockbroker whose charm, pedigree, and scandalous allure made him both admired and notorious. Best known today as the dashing but troubled father of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Blackjack Bouvier embodied the glamour and contradictions of his era. Behind the tailored suits and society headlines was a man navigating privilege, ambition, and personal turmoil. In this video, we unveil 50 facts about the man who helped shape one of America's most iconic first ladies and left behind a legacy both complicated and unforgettable. You're watching Cultured Elegance. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Born on May 19, 1891 in New York City, John Vernou Bouvier III arrived into a world of privilege layered with pretension. He would grow into a man remembered more for his rakish charm than his accomplishments, but his beginnings were steeped in tradition, expectation, and carefully curated heritage. His father, Major John Vernou Bouvier Jr., was a Columbia Law School graduate who seemed more committed to ancestry than affection. The Major compiled a thick, privately printed volume titled Our Forebears, tracing the family lineage to French nobility and American Revolutionary heroes. Despite their carefully burnished image, the Bouvier were in truth third-generation French immigrants, prosperous but deeply insecure, who romanticized their past by transforming merchants into marquises and tailors into titled nobles. The myth of Bouvier aristocracy persisted well into the mid-20th century, culminating in 1953, when newspapers breathlessly described Jackie's marriage to Senator John F. Kennedy as the union of Irish-American political royalty and French nobility. In reality, the Bouvier pedigree was more fabrication than fact. The Major, with his stern demeanor and reverence for discipline, found little common ground with his son, whose early signs of rebellion were not so much hidden as flaunted. In contrast, Jack's mother, Maud Sargent Bouvier, adored him. Where the Major disapproved, Maud indulged. Her unconditional love gave Jack an intoxicating sense of entitlement that would shape his behavior for decades to come. From his earliest days, Jack stood out, not just for his behavior, but for his looks. He inherited the Bouvier family's dark, exotic coloring and piercing eyes, features that earned him nicknames like the Sheik and the Black Orchid well before adulthood. Handsome, spoiled, and already aware of his effect on others, Jack began performing the part of the charming rogue long before he entered formal society. He was, by all accounts, a beautiful child, and he grew into a dangerously captivating young man. Education was more of a performance than a pursuit for Jack. He attended Columbia Grammar School and later Phillips Exeter Academy, but he was expelled from the latter for gambling, an early sign of the compulsions that would later dominate his adult life. By the time he reached Yale, it was clear he had no intellectual ambitions. He was there for the parties, the women, and the aura of sophistication. He drank in the traditions of the Ivy League, but rarely the lectures. Despite his expulsion from Exeter, Jack still gained admission to Yale, a testament to the family name and not his academic prowess. He floated through classes, more committed to tailored clothes and courtship than curriculum. He was already becoming a collector of mirrors and admirers. At Yale, he was regularly mistaken for film stars like Rudolph Valentino and later Clark Gable. His thick jet-black hair was always parted, just so, his suits perfectly fitted, his posture impeccable. Beneath the cultivated exterior, however, there was little sense of purpose. Jack had no hunger for professional success, and even less tolerance for restraint. What he chased instead was thrill, whether at the card table, on the racetrack, or in the arms of a new woman. The contradictions of his youth, groomed by pedigree, undone by vice, made him a source of both pride and disappointment within the Bouvier family. To some he was dazzling, to others a cautionary tale. His early life was a rehearsal for the man he would become, impeccably dressed, dangerously charismatic, and fundamentally unreliable. Blackjack Bouvier was never meant to be ordinary, but what he did with that inheritance of beauty and charm would leave the family divided for generations. He was far from alone in the Bouvier household. His three sisters, Maud, Michelle, and Edith, Big Edie, formed a trio of dramatic contrasts. Among them, Big Edie would cast the longest cultural shadow, though in their youth it was Jack who stole the spotlight. The twins, Maud and Michelle, were more traditional, adhering to the refined expectations of Bouvier womanhood. But within the family dynamic, even they were subject to rivalry, jealousy, and moments of estrangement, tensions that simmered just below the surface of polite society dinners. Big Edie, who studied voice at the Juilliard-affiliated New York Institute of Musical Art, had a theatrical streak that made her both beloved and exasperating within the family. She believed herself destined for the stage, and was often caught practicing when guests arrived. Jack, despite being at the center of parental indulgence and attention, rarely showed interest in his sisters' lives. He was detached from their dramas, unless they interfered with his own indulgences. He was never cruel, but often indifferent. The Bouvier family found its seasonal rhythm in East Hampton, where summer was more than a season. It was a lifestyle. In 1912, they began this ritual at Wildmoor, a breezy, cedar-shingled house, just steps from the ocean. Wildmoor introduced Jack to a set of rituals that would become essential to his adult image. Dressing for dinner, even in the heat, practicing social charm at garden teas, and always performing leisure as though it were an art form. It wasn't until 1925 that the family's East Hampton identity crystallized with the purchase of Lasada. The Georgian Revival home, with its elms, pergolas, and manicured lawns, presented itself as an oasis of decorum, but inside it was a theater of simmering dysfunction. While the Major turned Lasada into a stage set for Edwardian rituals, chauffeurs, croquet, silver tea service, Jack treated it more like a private resort. He rode horses not for sport, but for effect. He dressed immaculately, not for tradition, but to seduce. Janet Norton Lee first encountered John Blackjack Bouvier in the summer of 1927 at the Maidstone Club in East Hampton, a fateful meeting that would set the course of both their lives. He stood out instantly, 6 feet tall, deep tan, and impeccably dressed in a dark blue raw silk suit, a crimson tie, and a crisp white shirt. With his chiseled cheekbones, handsome eyes, and pencil-thin mustache, Jack possessed a kind of rakish film star magnetism that overwhelmed the 19-year-old Janet, who later described the meeting as love at first sight, a connection sealed with an unbreakable gaze. For Janet, who had grown up under the rigid control of her father, James T. Lee, Blackjack represented a kind of thrilling chaos. He was dazzling, indulgent, and faintly dangerous. Janet's father loathed Jack almost instantly, viewing him as undisciplined, overindulged, and socially inferior. Despite their proximity on Park Avenue and in East Hampton, the Lees and the Bouvier coexisted more as wary rivals than peers. When Janet announced her intention to marry Jack after only a brief courtship, Lee's response was an uncompromising, "Absolutely not." On paper, Jack seemed a suitable match. The Bouviers were old money, with opulent Fifth Avenue residences, 2 sprawling East Hampton estates, and an income reputedly near $100,000 a year, roughly $1.5 million today. Yet beneath this polished facade, Jim Lee saw a man deeply in financial trouble. Jack's cavalier attitude toward business and his heavy debts were no secret. The Bouvier family had bailed him out repeatedly, masking his precarious situation. While the Bouviers looked down on the Lees as social climbers, the Lees, despite their wealth, remained painfully aware of their outsider status, fueling a mutual disdain cloaked in civility. Yet Janet remained unmoved by either family's disapproval. From the Bouvier's perspective, Janet's pursuit of Jack was interpreted as social ambition, a strategic marriage into a more established lineage. Ironically, this suspicion of status-seeking came from a family whose own noble claims were part fantasy. Even before their wedding, Blackjack's reputation as a relentless womanizer was widely known. Friends questioned whether he could ever be faithful. Janet hoped and believed that marriage and fatherhood would tame his restless spirit. Janet's swift acceptance of Jack's proposal only widened the family divide. Her mother, Margaret, sympathetic to her daughter's desires and bitter from her own failing marriage, privately encouraged Janet's rebellion against Jim's control. On July 7, 1928, Janet Leigh and Jack Bouvier married in a beautiful ceremony at St. Philomena's Church in East Hampton. Janet was 21, Jack was 37, a notable age gap signaling deeper mismatches beyond years. The marriage bridged not just age, but religion and temperament. Janet, an Episcopalian, valued order and restraint. Jack was impulsive, pleasure-seeking, and proudly undisciplined. Their wedding reception took place at the Lees' grand summer home on Lily Pond Lane, designed by architect Harry T. Lindeberg. It was a setting of elegance, reflecting the appearance of two well-matched New York families joining forces. Behind the polished veneer, the Bouvier greeted the union with polite skepticism. Few believed Jack would marry at all, and even fewer expected him to settle down with a woman whose reputation was of control and discipline rather than frivolity. Blackjack and Janet's honeymoon aboard the luxurious Cunard liner Aquitania promised a romantic Atlantic crossing, but old habits proved harder to break than new vows. On board was the glamorous Newport heiress Doris Duke, and despite being newlywed, Jack couldn't resist flirting with her, drawn, as always, to the thrill of the chase and the allure of wealth. Once in France, the couple retreated to Biarritz, a coastal resort famed for its aristocratic visitors and glittering casinos, but it was here their honeymoon took a darker turn. Blackjack's compulsive gambling emerged quickly. He lost a significant amount at the casino the very night they arrived, leaving him visibly depressed. In an unexpected display of resolve, Janet gathered the couple's remaining funds and returned to the casino, winning back all the lost money, an early indication of her steely practicality amid his recklessness. For Janet, who had defied her father to marry Jack, the experience was a sobering lesson in the challenges ahead, though she maintained the poised facade of a dutiful new bride. Shortly after marrying, Jack and Janet settled into a rent-free 11-room duplex at 740 Park Avenue, an exclusive Manhattan address owned by Janet's father, a mere 2 blocks from Central Park, which would become a constant in Jackie's life. Jack, ever concerned with his physique, was often seen jogging around the Park Avenue reservoir in a rubber suit, sweating off the excesses of his indulgent lifestyle. Weekends and summers were spent in East Hampton, where both the Bouvier and Leigh families owned grand seaside homes in a community dubbed Wall Street-on-Sea, due to its concentration of New York's financial elite. The couple's life was a glittering carousel of dinners at elite venues like the River Club and polo matches at Meadowbrook Hunt Club, epitomizing the union of wealth, beauty, and social prominence. Yet beneath this polished surface, cracks in the marriage appeared early. While proud of Janet's beauty, pedigree, and horseback skills, Jack remained a reckless figure, addicted to risk, temptation, and indulgence. Janet's pregnancy with their first child unfolded amid traditional social rituals, luncheons, baby showers, and shopping at Bonwit Teller, but was overshadowed by growing doubts about Jack's dependability. As Janet prepared for motherhood, Jack was distracted by horse racing, golf, stock market speculation, and extramarital affairs, leaving friends to whisper about the couple's mounting tensions. Though publicly the picture of glamour and poised success, their marriage was already strained emotionally. The arrival of their daughter, Jacqueline Lee, would temporarily anchor them, but underlying discord lingered. Janet gave birth to Jacqueline Lee Bouvier on July 28, 1929, at Southampton Hospital, 6 weeks later than expected, and during the peak of the Hampton summer season, marking Janet's transition into motherhood at just 21. The birth honored both family patriarchs, Jackie's name a tribute to her father, Blackjack, and grandfather James T. Lee, signaling the merging of two ambitious lineages. Tragedy struck in early October 1929 when Jack's younger brother, William Sergeant Bud Bouvier, died alone in California, a man haunted by war wounds, alcoholism, divorce, and public disgrace. Bud's death deeply affected the Bouvier family patriarch, Major John Vernou Bouvier Jr., compounding his stern sense of duty with grief and a shadow over the family legacy. Just 8 days later, the Wall Street crash devastated the nation and the Bouvier. Blackjack initially capitalized by shorting stocks, gaining $100,000, but soon lost those profits as the market plunged further. The Major's fortune also suffered significant losses, though he maintained appearances of wealth and status despite the family's diminishing liquidity. Janet maintained her poise and prominence, often featured in society and sports pages for her impeccable riding fashion and formidable equestrian skills, her focus and grace, drawing comparisons to tennis legend Helen Wills Moody. In 1933, Janet gave birth to her second daughter, Caroline Lee Bouvier, known simply as Lee, born on March 3rd at Doctors Hospital in Manhattan. Both Jackie and Lee carried their mother's maiden name, Lee, as their middle names, a deliberate choice underscoring Janet's desire to root her daughters' identities equally in her own lineage as well as their father's. From infancy, Jackie and Lee's relationship was a mix of close companionship and quiet rivalry. They were often dressed alike and affectionately nicknamed Jacks and Peaks within the family. Summers at the Lasada estate were filled with nursery games, storybooks, and shared childhood adventures, yet Janet's clear favoritism toward Jackie sowed early seeds of sisterly tension. By 1934, when Jackie was 5, the growing cracks in Janet and Jack's marriage became more apparent behind their carefully maintained social facade. Despite his infidelities, Blackjack doted on his daughters and adored them passionately, maintaining a complex duality between family affection and reckless behavior. Jackie was, by nearly every account, Blackjack's favorite child. He lavished her with praise, calling her beautiful and brilliant in front of others. The family joked that Jack's stream of flattery was like vitamin P, P for praise, doses of fatherly adoration that fed Jackie's early confidence. Even Lee, years later, admitted the bond between her sister and their father was something special. Though Janet endured Jack's repeated cheating, she admitted years later the pain of being cast aside was tempered by their powerful, addictive intimacy, which kept her tethered to the marriage. A revealing photograph from the 1930s showed Janet perched stylishly in riding clothes on a fence, while behind her Jack openly held hands with a young woman named Virginia Kernican. The image was published in the New York Daily News, causing deep humiliation for Janet. Financial strain was another major source of conflict. By 1933 and 1934, Jack had to seek loans from his wealthy father-in-law to stay afloat, and his dependence on James T. Lee's grudging charity for their Park Avenue home humiliated him. Despite a brief improvement in his stock market fortunes in 1936, Blackjack faced pressure from creditors. over significant debts and back taxes. Janet harbored bitter resentment over Jack's failure to provide emotional stability and affection, feelings compounded by her own chilly relationship with her father. The daughters clearly preferred their charming, indulgent father over their strict, often critical mother, creating a family dynamic where Jackie and Lee subconsciously sided with Jack against Janet. Friends noted that both girls hated their mother, with Jackie having a complex closeness with her father, whom she both adored and felt ashamed of. Janet's violent temper persisted into her daughter's adulthood, with reports of physical outbursts and striking Jackie during angry episodes. In late September 1936, Janet demanded a 6-month trial separation. Blackjack moved out to a nearby hotel, favored for his frequent romantic rendezvous. The couple reunited briefly during the summer of 1937 in East Hampton, but permanently separated after Labor Day on returning to New York. The Lees blamed Blackjack entirely for the family's troubles. Janet's younger sister, Winifred, described him as a terrible guy, the worst man you could possibly find. After the divorce, Blackjack's life became increasingly turbulent and marked by decline. Freed from the constraints of marriage, he indulged his reckless impulses without restraint. He continued his pattern of chasing women, frequenting parties, and living a lifestyle fueled by charm but lacking stability. Financial difficulties dogged him persistently. Despite occasional gains in the stock market, his debts mounted, including obligations to family members and the IRS. His social standing, once bolstered by the Bouvier name and old money connections, gradually eroded as his behavior and reputation suffered. Though he remained devoted to his daughters in his own way, his personal shortcomings overshadowed his paternal role. Blackjack struggled to maintain meaningful relationships and was often seen as a tragic figure, a man caught between privilege and self-destruction. At Jackie's 1953 wedding to John F. Kennedy, what should have been one of the happiest days of her life became, quietly, one of the most painful. Her father was supposed to walk her down the aisle at St. Mary's Church in Newport. He had prepared for it for months. He'd dried out, gotten in shape, and was staying at the elegant Viking Hotel nearby. He adored Jackie, and this moment, escorting her as the bride, meant the world to him. But behind the scenes, the tension between Janet and her ex-husband was still simmering. According to Gore Vidal, Janet sent Lee's husband, Michael Canfield, to deliver a message to Blackjack at the Viking Hotel. He was welcome at the church to give Jackie away, but he was not invited to the reception afterward. Canfield, a gentleman by nature, carried out the errand reluctantly, feeling it was cruel. Jack, hurt and humiliated, headed straight to the hotel bar. That night he drank heavily, and by the morning he was in no condition to walk his daughter down the aisle. Jackie's stepfather, Hugh Auchincloss, stepped in at the last minute. Outwardly, Jackie kept her composure, but inside she was devastated. She didn't blame her father. In her view, it was Janet who had orchestrated the entire situation, from excluding him at the rehearsal dinner to effectively ensuring he would miss the most important moment of the wedding. Lee later recalled the heartbreak of it all, and that his collapse that day was more than understandable. He had received a letter from Janet suggesting that it would be better for everyone if he simply chose not to attend. Between that and being left out of the celebratory dinner, he was deeply depressed. Understandably, Lee said, he just got completely drunk the night before, unable to give his beloved daughter away the next day. Right after the ceremony, Lee chartered a plane and flew him back to New York, checking him into a hospital. It was, in many ways, the cruelest outcome. Blackjack had looked forward to that day for months. It was supposed to be his moment with Jackie, the daughter he adored. As Lee later said, it was the biggest, the most important moment in his life. Jackie would later send her father a note telling him that she forgave him, and their relationship eventually mended. In his final years, his finances, once buoyed by the fast and loose strategies of the 1920s, had collapsed long ago. What little remained was chipped away by mounting debts, unpaid taxes, and his enduring penchant for excess. The dashing stockbroker, who once commanded constant attention, was now living in reduced circumstances, more of a ghost than a presence in the world he once dominated. His health declined steadily. Years of hard living, alcohol, stress, and emotional turmoil had taken a toll on his body. He suffered from liver disease, likely the result of his chronic drinking, and in time cancer was diagnosed. The man once known for his athleticism and striking good looks, who had once jogged in rubber suits around the Central Park Reservoir, became a shadow of his former self. And yet, even as his physical strength waned, there remained in Blackjack a flicker of charm, a flicker of pride. When he died in August 1957 at the age of 66, it was not as a fallen financier or disgraced husband that Jackie remembered him, but as the father who had once lifted her onto ponies, praised her school essays with gleaming eyes, and told her she was the most beautiful girl in the world. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to explore my most recommended books on John Vernou Bouvier III, linked in the description below, and let me know in the comments. Which fact surprised you the most, or is there one you think I should have included? If you'd like to support the channel, you'll find links to our channel membership options and newsletter in the description. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves history and elegance. Until next time,